well, we've got WNBA teams all over the league now officially having scheduling conflicts. Now, in case you're wondering, well, wouldn't they know about scheduling conflicts long prior to setting their schedules and this and that and the other? Well, of course they would, right? Except the scheduling conflict these teams have, what has now become, I think pretty confidently we can now say, firmly America's team, is starting to percolate out through the scheduling in all the WNBA cities, and they're making adjustments. They're making adjustments. Now, I will tell you, it's hilarious that so many of these WNBA teams, in fact, there's only been one team, and I gave them credit for it, I did, that has come out and blatantly just said it. All right? We're moving games, and we're doing it because of Caitlin Clark.
The WNBA is experiencing something it has never faced before, a single rookie commanding so much attention that entire games are being uprooted and relocated. It's not just about selling an extra batch of tickets. Entire arenas are being swapped out for bigger ones, stadiums that can fit thousands more people, all because of one name. The sudden rise of Caitlin Clark has turned a once predictable league schedule upside down, sparking debates, controversies, and even some bruised egos among star veterans. How did we reach this point, and why is this development so important for the league's future? The seeds of this frenzy were planted long before Clark even took the court as a professional. Fans watched her light up the NCAA ranks, dropping staggering performances and pulling off jaw-dropping shots that left entire arenas in awe. When the Indiana Fever drafted her first overall, everyone expected she'd make waves. But nobody quite anticipated the scale of her impact. Now, entire franchises are rushing to move her games into NBA arenas that can seat 2 or 3 times the crowds, and tickets for these matches are selling at rates previously unimaginable for women's basketball. Amid this rush to accommodate Clark's legion of supporters, veteran WNBA stars, such as A.A. Wilson, reportedly feel sidelined, their long-term contributions overshadowed by the fresh excitement of a newcomer. For fans of the league, it's a dream come true to see this level of attention and hype. For the players who've toiled in half-empty gyms, it's a sign that maybe, finally, the WNBA is garnering mainstream respect and financial backing. Yet for others, there's an uncomfortable sense that the league is putting too many of its eggs in one basket. The question echoes in locker rooms and front offices alike. Is this a sign of the league growing up, or has it gone too far by granting a rookie privileges that veterans rarely got? By the end of the story, you might find yourself torn. Is it good business for the WNBA to ride the wave of Clark's unprecedented fame, or does it risk alienating the very people who've been building this league for years? One thing is certain, there's no going back. The league is at a crossroads where tradition meets transformation, and we're about to explore the twists and turns of how a single player has managed to rattle an entire system. Get ready for the inside story behind the big venue switches, the locker room tensions, and the business decisions that could redefine women's basketball for years to come. It all begins with Caitlin Clark's electrifying stint in college basketball. Even before she turned pro, her name was on the lips of basketball fans everywhere. She was a standout performer at the University of Iowa, consistently wowing spectators with long-range shooting, pinpoint passes, and a flair that made every game feel like an event. Her highlight reels became social media gold, shared thousands of times by fans, sports analysts, and even celebrities. As the chatter grew louder, a new narrative emerged. Could she be the one to finally launch the WNBA into the broader cultural spotlight? When the Indiana Fever selected Clark with the first overall pick, interest in the WNBA spiked overnight. Ticket sales for Fever games rose dramatically, and anticipation for her professional debut turned into national news. Merchandise bearing Clark's name sold out in hours, setting records for the fastest-selling jersey in WNBA history. Meanwhile, social media platforms were flooded with posts comparing her to some of the NBA's biggest sharpshooters. It was as if every conversation about women's basketball suddenly hinged on Clark, her style, her stats, and her potential to rewrite the record books. On the court, Clark wasted little time proving she belonged. In her first few outings, she showcased the same fearlessness and court vision that captivated audiences at the collegiate level. Fans crammed into smaller WNBA arenas to see if the hype was real. Soon, it became apparent that the demand to watch Clark wasn't just big, it was bigger than many facilities could handle. When her first few road games sold out, ticket scalpers made a killing reselling seats at prices that had never been seen before for a WNBA match. Sports reporters began covering Fever games on primetime segments, a rarity for women's hoops. The ripple effects were immediate and overwhelming. What truly set Clark apart, beyond her raw skill, was her dynamic presence. Off the court, she came across as humble and team-oriented, always quick to credit her teammates and coaching staff. Yet there was an undeniable spark in her media interviews that suggested she was ready for this moment, never shying away from the spotlight. Broadcasters frequently noted how comfortably she navigated interviews, press conferences, and social media interactions, an essential trait in today's sports environment, where marketability often hinges on an athlete's public persona. But success breeds complications. The fever-pitch demand for Clark's appearances didn't just impact Indiana's home games. Each WNBA city on the schedule braced itself for the influx of fans wanting to witness her in action, often overwhelming ticket portals in mere hours. Suddenly, the league that once struggled to fill seats found itself grappling with a very different problem. How do you accommodate a wave of new spectators that threatens to burst the capacity of existing arenas? This level of attention wasn't universally celebrated. While team owners and executives saw dollar signs, some skeptics wondered if this was just a temporary flash in the pan. After all, women's basketball has seen star players before. Legends like Diana Taurasi, Sue Bird, and Candace Parker often carried the league on their shoulders. Yet none had prompted multiple venue overhauls within their first season. Was it purely talent driving Clark's popularity, or had the perfect storm of social media, collegiate hype, and public appetite for a new face in sports converged at just the right time? Regardless, there was no questioning her status as the WNBA's newest, and perhaps biggest, draw. And as the crowds continued to swell, the conversation turned to whether new measures were needed to host this phenomenon. That's when the phone calls began from general managers and league officials, calls that would lead to the surprising venue shakeups. The first major clue that the WNBA was on the brink of something extraordinary came when the Phoenix Mercury announced they were relocating a home game against the Indiana Fever. Initially slated for the Footprint Center, they decided instead to move the match to the significantly larger Desert Financial Arena at Arizona State University. That switch came as a shock because these adjustments aren't trivial. Renting out a bigger arena means different scheduling logistics, higher operating costs, and a slew of fresh marketing challenges. Still, the Mercury's front office deemed the risk worthwhile. The match was nearly sold out weeks in advance. It didn't take long for other franchises to follow suit. Almost like dominoes toppling one after another, new announcements poured in. The Los Angeles Sparks shifted a match from the Walter Pyramid to the much larger Crypto.com Arena, and soon after, the Dallas Wings declared their intention to host an upcoming Fever game at the NBA's American Airlines Center. Each of these venues more than doubled or tripled the capacity of the original WNBA arenas, pushing potential attendance into five-figure territory, unheard of for a typical regular season game in women's basketball. What might have started as a single experiment to test whether a bigger venue could actually fill those extra seats quickly evolved into a blueprint for a new normal. Overnight, it became apparent that whenever the Fever, led by Clark, came to town, local organizations wanted to maximize their ticket revenue. In some cities, the surge in demand was so intense that even the upgraded venues faced potential sellouts. Scalpers had a field day, and some fans complained about skyrocketing secondary market prices. This used to be the sort of chaos reserved for marquee NBA playoffs, not a WNBA midseason fixture on a Tuesday night. Predictably, these sudden venue changes introduced complications. For players on the Wings, Mercury, or Sparks, the shift meant practicing in unfamiliar settings and coordinating with the new arena staff to figure out locker room assignments, floor layouts, and even how the lighting would affect their shooting. Some players grumbled that these changes disrupted their rhythm and routine, factors that often matter in tight schedules. Coaches had to adapt scouting reports that took into account the visual depth perception differences of a larger arena. If you've ever played basketball, you know how crucial it is to get a feel for the backdrop behind the basket. In the WNBA, those details become magnified under high-stakes conditions. Fans, too, found themselves in a whirlwind. Season ticket holders sometimes discovered their usual seats either didn't exist in the new venue's format or were relocated to spots they hadn't chosen. Some were thrilled to see the league they love getting an upgrade, while others felt inconvenienced by the logistical scramble. Social media was ablaze with commentary, praise for the WNBA's growth, criticism for last-minute changes, and memes about how Clark was snatching up entire arenas. At the league office, this phenomenon was both exciting and anxiety-inducing. On one hand, Commissioner Kathy Angel-Burt relished the headlines heralding the WNBA's newfound popularity. The league had been longing for mainstream relevance, and here it was front and center. But the breakneck pace of these changes raised questions about long-term strategy. Could the league keep up this momentum? Or was it setting itself up for logistical nightmares, disappointed fans, and potential conflicts with established players who felt overshadowed? This was the moment the WNBA had wished for over 2 decades, a tangible swell of public interest that could translate into bigger revenues, stronger sponsorship deals, and more consistent media coverage. Yet all of it hinged on the presence of a rookie phenomenon. If anything jeopardized that star shine, be it injury, slumps in performance, or controversies, the league could find itself in a precarious position. Still, the immediate reward was too enticing to pass up. Tens of thousands of new fans flocking to see a show that, in many ways, was rewriting the story of women's basketball. But while the league office and various team owners were mostly optimistic, whispers of frustration and resentment began to surface among some of the WNBA's biggest names. Yes, fans were coming out in droves, but not necessarily for the veterans who had been the pillars of the league. Instead, all eyes were on the rookie who, intentionally or not, was shaking up the status quo. And the star who reportedly felt this most acutely was none other than A.A. Wilson. It's not that A.A. Wilson, or any of the other established superstars, dislikes Caitlin Clark personally. By most accounts, Wilson has been nothing but gracious in her public statements, even congratulating Clark on her incredible start. But behind closed doors, reports suggest a different story. The rumor mill claims Wilson is privately fuming over what she perceives as the league bending over backward for a single newcomer, while veterans who've carried the WNBA's banner for years rarely received comparable fanfare. Wilson is no ordinary player. She's a multiple-time MVP, a gold medalist on the international stage, and a champion who has helped elevate the profile of women's basketball to new heights. For her, the WNBA was never just about individual glory. It was about proving that women's sports deserve the same respect, media coverage, and financial backing as the men's leagues. She played through the league's leanest periods, sometimes in front of sparse crowds, while continuing to deliver jaw-dropping performances that won fans and accolades. Now, with venues suddenly swelling in capacity and talk of sellouts for Clark's appearances, some veterans can't help but feel a twinge of resentment. While they appreciate the spotlight on the WNBA, the messaging can sting. Why are these perks and expansions appearing only after Clark's arrival? For years, star athletes pleaded for better venues, improved marketing, and more robust broadcasting deals, often hearing excuses about budget constraints or lack of public interest. Overnight, it seems the league has discovered those resources, fueled by the mania around a single rookie. Sources close to Wilson say she's trying to focus on her own game and not let the situation become a distraction. Yet the frustration is real, reflecting a broader sentiment among veterans who champion the league without ever seeing these kinds of large-scale changes. Many recall times when they asked for marquee promotional campaigns or primetime TV slots, only to be met with lukewarm responses. Now, with the unstoppable hype for Clark, the league appears more than willing to grant prime marketing real estate, shift entire game schedules, and negotiate for bigger arenas. This situation highlights a deeper cultural tension within the WNBA. On one hand, players desperately want the league to flourish. A more successful WNBA means better salaries, more job security, and the chance to inspire future generations of female athletes. On the other hand, the veterans rightly wonder if the league's renewed enthusiasm for expansions and bigger venues might lead to overshadowing the accomplishments of those who laid the groundwork. In interviews, Wilson has avoided calling out Clark directly. She's made vague references to respect for those who've built the league, which fans and analysts have interpreted as subtle digs at the current situation. Social media chatter further fans the flames, with some supporters rallying behind Wilson and demanding the league celebrate its established icons more openly. Others argue that a rising tide lifts all boats, that the hype around Clark will eventually benefit Wilson, the league, and every other player who stands to profit from the increased attention. The dynamic isn't merely about one star's jealousy or disappointment. It taps into a long-standing debate about how leagues, sponsors, and media outlets allocate resources. When a fresh face arrives with mass market appeal, it can spark an influx of revenue that was never before available. But that same boom can highlight how, in the past, the organization might have been reluctant or unable to invest in better facilities and marketing for its existing talent. Of course, it's possible that the friction is being overblown by media outlets hungry for drama. The WNBA has historically been tight-knit. Many players share personal bonds and come together for social causes. The hope is that any behind-the-scenes conflict might dissipate once everyone recognizes the bigger picture, a golden opportunity to elevate the sport. Yet, as we'll see in the next sections, the business implications of this hype bring their own set of complications, and they're not always conducive to keeping everyone happy. Whenever there's a seismic shift in sports, money is almost always the underlying catalyst or beneficiary. In this case, the hype around Caitlin Clark has unleashed an economic windfall that WNBA teams haven't experienced before. Ticket sales for Fever Road games began skyrocketing as soon as the schedule was announced, with some seats for Clark matchups rivaling the prices one might see for a mid-tier NBA contest. Merchandise has also soared to new heights. Fans can't get enough of official WNBA gear that bears Clark's name and number, and many shops reported back orders that extended weeks beyond normal supply timelines. The sudden infusion of revenue doesn't just benefit the Fever. Every team hosting them stands to earn a sizable profit from concessions, parking, and team-branded merch. For years, some franchises operated on razor-thin margins, relying on NBA ownership or outside sponsorships to remain viable. Now, they're witnessing a phenomenon akin to a gold rush. The question becomes, how do we maximize these gains without pushing away longtime supporters or overshadowing other marketable stars? Sponsors have taken notice. Corporations that previously viewed the WNBA as a smaller investment opportunity now see it as a prime space to reach a rapidly expanding audience. Some companies, realizing the potential for bigger crowds and more media coverage, have negotiated multi-year contracts that center around high-profile games, particularly those featuring Clark. This uptick in sponsorship funds could translate into better player salaries, improved training facilities, and enhanced marketing budgets for the entire league. But there's a flip side. If the league becomes overly reliant on one player's popularity, a downturn in her performance or an unfortunate injury could stifle the momentum. The league office, led by Commissioner Kathy Angelbert, is well aware of this. Publicly, they celebrate how these new deals and larger venues represent a watershed moment. Privately, sources indicate they're concerned about how to distribute these newfound resources fairly. If the league channels too much attention and money toward boosting Clark's brand, it risks alienating the other athletes who've also grown the WNBA. Yet if it downplays Clark's star power, they might lose out on a once-in-a-generation chance to catapult the league into the mainstream consciousness. Television networks and streaming platforms have also jumped on the bandwagon. Demand for broadcasting Fever games soared after Clark's early success became national news. Subsequently, more WNBA matchups are landing on prime slots, a feat that's been years in the making. Some networks are even experimenting with additional camera angles and specialized features like miking up players to capture the heightened drama of Clark's performances. Each successful broadcast can become a ratings bonanza, fueling more advertiser interest and larger TV rights deals. These shifting economics pose a dilemma for owners. Teams like the Dallas Wings or Phoenix Mercury are enjoying unexpected windfalls whenever Clark's squad comes to visit. But how much should they invest in scaling up their own arena capacities on a permanent basis? Upgrades to seating, luxury boxes, and technology require substantial capital. If the league's upward trajectory continues, these improvements could pay off. If not, owners might regret overextending their budgets once the initial excitement subsides. Meanwhile, coaches feel the pressure of commercial expectations. Media interviews go beyond just game analysis. They also focus on ticket sales, fan engagement, and marketing push. Some coaches embrace this, seeing it as a chance to draw bigger audiences to women's basketball, but others worry that commercial interests might overshadow the competitive essence of the sport. After all, any coach's top priority is to win games, not sell seats or help the league hash out multi-million-dollar sponsorships. The players are caught in the middle, simultaneously welcoming the financial gains and feeling the weight of performance expectations. Veterans like A.A. Wilson may not love the overshadowing effect of Clark's hype, but they can't deny that bigger venues and higher TV ratings can lead to improved collective bargaining power. Rookies on other teams might find themselves inspired or intimidated. After all, the bar has been set. If you come into the WNBA with enough hype, you could single-handedly reshape league economics. As the money continues pouring in, the WNBA stands at a crossroads. The business side is humming like never before, but that newfound prosperity stokes an urgent need for wise, long-range planning. Can the league harness this momentum to fund deeper marketing campaigns that spotlight not just Clark, but also the full roster of stars? Or will it become too reliant on a single athlete's headline-grabbing presence? Balancing these possibilities might be the greatest test the WNBA has ever faced. Beneath the swirl of financial analyses and venue relocations, there are real, tangible effects on the people who matter most, the players. For the Indiana Fever's roster, traveling with Caitlin Clark has become a circus of media attention. Cameras follow the team's bus. Journalists descend on pre-game shoot-arounds, peppering them with questions about what it's like to play alongside or coach the future of women's basketball. Some teammates find it exhilarating. Their matches are no longer under-the-radar events. Others find it distracting, a constant drain on their focus as they try to prepare for games. Even practice sessions feel different. Opposing teams have started tailoring defensive strategies specifically to contain Clark, poring over film and analyzing every shooting angle she might exploit. That heightened scrutiny has ripple effects on the entire Fever squad. Open looks for other players might suddenly appear if 2 or 3 defenders flock to Clark on the perimeter. Conversely, if Clark has a rare off night, the rest of the Fever must scramble to pick up the slack. The attention on her performance can overshadow the fact that women's basketball is a highly collaborative sport where a collective effort often trumps individual brilliance. Beyond Indiana, players throughout the league grapple with the phenomenon. Rookies who came in without Clark's fanfare might feel overshadowed even if they're performing at a high level. Veterans who once relished the role of leading scorers now find the media obsessed with analyzing Clark's every move. Some players express relief. Bigger crowds and better TV exposure translate into more endorsements, potentially benefiting everyone. Others quietly admit that it stings to see the league pivot so dramatically for one rookie when they themselves have dreamed of playing before jam-packed arenas for most of their professional careers. Then there's the question of mental health. Being thrust into an intense spotlight can be as stressful as it is rewarding. Clark, by all accounts, handles the attention with poise, but even she must feel the weight of constant scrutiny and the burden of fan expectations. Every missed shot can become headline material, every turnover a trending topic on social media. If the team loses, critics might wonder whether the hype was overblown. If the team wins, they might say it's only because of Clark, neglecting the contributions of an entire roster. Veterans like A.A. Wilson, who's made no secret about her passion for the league, might find themselves in an awkward position. On one hand, Wilson can capitalize on these bigger arenas to showcase her own dominance. On the other, she may resent the idea that fans are coming primarily to see someone else. If the marketing machine continues to favor the rookie storyline, does Wilson risk fading into the background, despite her track record as a champion and MVP? Emotional tensions like these don't always manifest in public statements, but they can simmer beneath the surface, potentially affecting on-court chemistry during high-stakes matchups. Interestingly, some players say they're thrilled just to see bigger paydays in the future. Collective bargaining agreements in professional sports often consider revenue streams, attendance figures, and media rights. If the WNBA can leverage Clark's popularity into more lucrative deals, everyone stands to profit in the long run. There's also the potential for improved training facilities, medical care, and travel arrangements, a huge win for athletes accustomed to less-than-ideal conditions. For fans dedicated to the league, the human element is what makes this story compelling. We're not just watching highlight reels or reading about ballooning ticket sales. We're witnessing how an entire community of athletes navigates a rapid shift in public perception and financial stakes. Newcomers may see it as an invitation to step up and carve out their own brand identities, while veterans might ride the wave or resist it. Either way, the league's social fabric is changing, and the emotional journey of each player adds layers of drama to every game night. And this is just the beginning. The flurry of venue changes, the financial gold rush, and the star-centric focus on Clark all point to a league in flux. Which begs the question, where does this all lead? Could we soon see WNBA teams regularly playing in NBA arenas? Will the euphoria last? Or will it fizzle if the league can't sustain the narrative? These are the questions swirling as we look toward the WNBA's future. The most obvious near-term possibility is that more franchises will proactively schedule high-profile games in larger NBA arenas. If the American Airlines Center sells out for a regular season matchup, you can bet other owners will take notice. Why keep capping attendance in smaller college venues or secondary arenas when you can bring in triple the crowd at a bigger facility? A successful transition to these larger spaces could mark a permanent shift in how the WNBA is presented, potentially matching the environment of its male counterpart in terms of scale, even if it's just for marquee games at first. Such an evolution demands new levels of corporate sponsorship and marketing campaigns. If the league proves it can consistently draw five-figure attendance numbers, sponsors will likely invest with greater confidence. We might see more creative partnerships, from major beverage companies to tech giants looking to tap into an energized fan base. This could also pave the way for advanced broadcast technologies, like augmented reality replays or next-level analytics shared live with viewers, concepts often tested in bigger leagues that have the resources to innovate. Another critical aspect is how the WNBA manages its star narratives going forward. If the league learns to market multiple players effectively, Clark being the biggest current draw, but by no means the only one, it could elevate the entire brand of women's basketball. Imagine a scenario where each major city boasts its own must-see star, drawing local fans and national attention, much like the NBA's system of superstar rivalries. This approach would require strategic coordination, promotional blitzes that highlight not just Clark, but also legends like Wilson, budding talents, and lesser-known players whose stories could resonate with fans if properly told. Youth development programs might also receive a boost. If the WNBA can harness the momentum around Clark's popularity, it could funnel more resources into grassroots basketball for girls, providing better coaching, facilities, and exposure. Eventually, that investment feeds back into the league when these young players become draft prospects. The cycle of talent development becomes more robust, yielding a deeper pool of skilled athletes who can carry the league's banner into the future. However, there are risks. If the league becomes too heavily invested in Clark's persona, if everything from marketing to venue choices revolves solely around her, the WNBA could find itself in a precarious position should her performance dip or if she faces a significant injury. It's one thing to ride a wave of hype. It's another to allow an entire enterprise to hinge on a single player. Smart organizations spread the risk by developing multiple stars and building a brand identity that can withstand the ebb and flow of individual careers. The WNBA's relationship with the NBA might also shift. For years, The men's league has provided financial and marketing support, but sometimes overshadowed the women's side by sheer scale. If the WNBA's revenue streams surge and attendance holds steady, we could see a realignment in how resources are allocated. Eventually, the WNBA might demand more independence, a bigger share of revenue, or even structural changes to further professionalize and expand the league. These shifts could lead to new ownership models, more intense negotiations over TV rights, and possibly fresh expansion teams in cities hungry for women's basketball. On the cultural front, the arrival of more young fans, especially girls who see Clark as a role model, could reshape the fan experience. This next generation of supporters might engage with the WNBA through TikTok highlights, YouTube streams, and interactive online communities. If harnessed effectively, the league could capitalize on this digital native audience to expand its reach globally, turning local hype into international fascination. Still, the path forward will likely be rocky at times. Controversies about revenue sharing, potential divisions among players, and the ongoing quest to balance hype with respect for veterans won't vanish overnight. Yet, in the grand scheme, these are the good problems that come with explosive growth. In a sense, they're the kind of problems the WNBA has always wanted. Debates about how best to handle a surge of attention and resources, rather than how to draw an audience in the first place. The real deciding factor will be whether the league's key players, both on the court and in the front office, can unify around a long-term vision. If they can, this could be a watershed moment, not just for the WNBA, but for the broader landscape of women's sports. The short history of professional women's basketball is filled with teams folding, players seeking more lucrative overseas contracts, and the league fighting for mainstream relevance. Now, there's an unprecedented chance to flip that script. When historians look back at this chapter of the WNBA, they might point to Caitlin Clark as the catalyst who transformed the league's destiny. The scramble to find bigger arenas, the rush of sponsors ready to invest, and the worldwide buzz around her name have all amplified the conversation about women's basketball to a level many once believed was out of reach. Whether you see these rapid changes as a necessary step in the league's evolution or a glaring instance of favoritism toward a single player, it's clear that the WNBA will never be the same. For A.A. Wilson and other veteran icons, the frustration is understandable. They've fought tooth and nail for coverage, respect, and fair compensation, only to watch an incoming rookie get accommodations they never dreamed possible. Yet the optimism is also real. A rising tide can indeed lift all boats, and if handled wisely, this wave of popularity can usher in a new era where the WNBA finally occupies a central place in sports culture. The potential for higher salaries, advanced facilities, and a more significant media presence could enrich the experience for every player, not just the marquee stars. The challenge now is maintaining balance. The league must embrace Clark's star power without eclipsing the remarkable talents of other athletes. It should celebrate every big personality, every compelling rivalry, and every underdog story that can keep fans glued to their seats. The timing is perfect for a renaissance in women's basketball if the WNBA makes smart, inclusive decisions. So, where do you stand? Is Clark's emergence a sign that the WNBA is finally breaking into the mainstream, or does the league risk alienating its existing fan base and top players by focusing so intently on a rookie? Sound off with your thoughts, because the debate isn't going away anytime soon. The only certainty is that we're witnessing a turning point, one that might one day be remembered as the spark that changed everything. If you're eager to keep up with all the ups and downs of this historic season, be sure to stay locked in. From A.A. Wilson's next move to the Fever's ongoing journey in newly packed arenas, each game will tell a piece of a larger story. No matter how you feel about the superstar hype, one thing's for sure. The WNBA is on the brink of a new reality, and it's a reality that promises more excitement, more drama, and perhaps the biggest leap forward the league has ever seen.
The Indiana Fever are that golden destination, and I can't help but laugh to the fans and the people online and the media commentators, unfortunately, who said that nobody wanted to play in Indiana. That doesn't make any sense.
People in the Fever were like, y'all.
That's not my point. There's a lot of other shit going on that players are like, this ain't where I want to be.
over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some new
Like
shit
it's
going
a
on
lot.
around there.
It's a lot. So you have players that are very significant on this Indiana Fever team that are like, I don't
wanna be here.
This is where I want to be.
She said that Kelsey Mitchell was actually the first person she hit up because they built a bond here, playing AU for the last 3 years. She said she heard some good things about Caitlin Clark from her Aces teammate.
They said the Indiana Fever couldn't sign top free agents. They mocked the franchise for years, claiming no superstar would ever choose to lace up for a team that once struggled to keep fans engaged, let alone attract fresh talent. Certain commentators, Cheryl Swoops being the loudest among them, bet the house on predictions of Indiana flopping in free agency. Yet here we are, mere months later, watching headlines explode with news of prize signings. If you believe the doubters, you're in for one eye-opening ride. It's almost comical now, remembering how confidently some people declared that the Fever locker room was an unwanted destination. But that story evaporated the moment multiple star players signed on the dotted line. In the past, Indiana was often overlooked, overshadowed by the bigger names in the league. Nobody gave them a second glance. Now, fans are doing double takes as the Fever shape up to become a serious contender, maybe even a championship threat. So, how did this seismic shift happen? What forced the naysayers into silence? And why is Cheryl Swoops nowhere to be found when people ask her to address Indiana's sudden success? Hold on tight, because the truth is a roller coaster ride of hype, controversy, and underdog ambition. Stick around to find out how Caitlin Clark and the rest of the Fever's new blood just might be rewriting the WNBA narrative faster than anyone expected. Before free agency even kicked off, certain figures in the basketball world were already penning Indiana's obituary. The loudest among them? Cheryl Swoops. She's a legend, no doubt about that, but her recent string of critiques aimed at Caitlin Clark and the Fever painted a gloomy picture. Swoops took to various platforms, from podcasts to social media snippets, to warn that no serious player would want to join a roster plagued by what she described as questionable leadership and deep-rooted problems. To hear her tell it, the franchise was steeped in chaos. Her words carried weight because she's not just any commentator. She's a Hall of Famer who changed the game in her own right. Fans and media outlets alike treated her statements as near gospel. As her takes circulated, a wave of public opinion swung against Indiana, with people echoing the same refrain. If Cheryl Swoops says it's bad, it must be really bad. The alleged issues ranged from an unhealthy locker room culture to friction between the coaching staff and certain players. Every rumor magnified the narrative that the Fever were simply not a desirable destination. But beneath those dire warnings lay a puzzling contradiction. Even as Swoops cast doubt on Indiana's culture, they boasted a core that included electrifying young talents like Caitlin Clark and Aya Boston, plus a proven scorer in Kelsey Mitchell. Clark, in particular, was shattering rookie records, lighting up the scoreboard, and attracting massive crowds. Despite that, critics still fixated on the notion that free agents would avoid Indiana at all costs. Some in the media tried to push back, questioning whether Swoops' opinions were fueled by personal bias or outdated intel. After all, organizations evolve, and the Fever were actively working on a massive facilities upgrade. Yet Swoops remained steadfast, propping up her narrative with anecdotal references to unnamed players who allegedly wanted out. The basketball world braced itself for a humiliating offseason in Indiana, one in which the Fever would fail to recruit and might even lose key players. Little did the skeptics know, a bombshell was about to drop. Behind the scenes, Indiana's head coach, Stephanie White, had been cooking up a plan so audacious, it would either catapult the team into contention or backfire spectacularly. She refused to settle for the slow and steady rebuild that so many WNBA franchises cling to. Instead, she wanted to capitalize on the sudden surge of attention Caitlin Clark had brought to Indiana. From local endorsements to network TV coverage, Clark was boosting the Fever's profile in ways no one could have predicted a year prior. Stephanie White saw the opening and pounced. She worked closely with the team's front office to build a recruiting strategy around two main pillars: showcase the potential of playing alongside Caitlin Clark and offer a state-of-the-art environment that made it impossible for players to ignore the Fever's pitch. They also doubled down on marketing efforts, pushing the narrative that Indiana wasn't just a basketball team. It was a cultural shift in the making. Brand new facilities worth upwards of $80 million served as a beacon for anyone skeptical about the franchise's commitment to winning. But White didn't stop at glossy sales pitches. She and her staff scouted relentlessly, making personal phone calls to free agents and meticulously presenting how each player's skill set would fit into the Fever's evolving system. This wasn't a half-baked approach. Every move was purposeful, every conversation laser-focused on how to transform Indiana's fortunes. Critics who'd once shrugged off the Fever started to take notice when bits of their plan leaked. After all, an $80 million facility upgrade isn't just for show. It signals deep-pocketed support from ownership, a willingness to invest in top-tier medical resources, strength training, and media outreach. In a league where players are often promised improvements only to see them fizzle, the Fever were different. They were actually delivering. By the time free agency officially opened, Stephanie White and the front office had everything lined up: money to spend, an alluring narrative about joining Caitlin Clark, and a brand new facility to seal the deal. Then came the signings that shook the WNBA. The first domino to fall was Natasha Howard, a defensive phenom renowned for her shot blocking, athleticism, and championship pedigree. Howard could have gone to any number of contenders. Yet, instead of picking a safe, established franchise, she chose Indiana. This single move was a powerful refutation of the "nobody wants to go there" narrative. Howard publicly praised Indiana's revamped approach, mentioning how excited she was to join a system that valued her two-way game and gave her a chance to be a foundational piece of something special. No sooner had the buzz around Howard subsided than news broke of Dana Bonner signing on. A Swiss Army knife of a player, Bonner is known for scoring in bunches, playing gritty defense, and bringing veteran leadership to the locker room. The idea that someone of her caliber, an all-star with championship experience, would elect to wear a Fever jersey left many fans and doubters in disbelief. Bonner confirmed the news on social media, expressing genuine excitement about reuniting with old friends and forging new bonds with the likes of Caitlin Clark. To top it off, she posted a pointed tweet that seemed aimed at critics. "Sometimes you find a team that's building something real, and you don't hesitate." But the Fever weren't finished. Sophie Cunningham was next, bringing her infamous trash-talking flair and lethal shooting. Her willingness to mix it up on defense made her a coveted free agent, and she happily admitted she was intrigued by Indiana's rising profile. One moment, Cheryl Swoops had been proclaiming that top-tier free agents would run away from the Fever. The very next, Indiana was assembling a dream team of personalities who gravitated toward a fresh, ambitious environment. Finally, Sydney Carlson, best friend to none other than A'ja Wilson, opted to leave a comfortable situation in Las Vegas to be part of the Fever's revival. Carlson's arrival put an exclamation point on this string of signings because it demonstrated that even the personal ties to a reigning championship squad weren't enough to outweigh the promise of something extraordinary brewing in Indiana. The once-dismissed franchise had become a magnet, pulling in players from every corner of the league with an appeal that transcended mere financial considerations. Beneath these high-profile acquisitions lies one central thread: Caitlin Clark. Rarely does a player in her first year turn an entire organization's fortunes around, yet Clark managed to do exactly that. Even during her rookie campaign, she put up performances that bordered on the surreal 30-point nights, triple-doubles, logo-range threes that left defenders shell-shocked. Statistically, she rivaled or surpassed established stars. Culturally, she drew a wave of fans who had never before tuned in to a WNBA game. It was the perfect storm. Early in the year, Cheryl Swoops, among others, tried to temper the hype by claiming it would take years for Clark to dominate. The truth? By mid-season, she was already top 3 in MVP chatter, regularly outdueling seasoned pros. Analysts started to question if Clark might be the biggest single-year draw in WNBA history, referencing record-setting viewership numbers whenever she stepped on the court. Social media pages dedicated to the league exploded with new followers, many of them openly admitting they'd come for Caitlin Clark. From the viewpoint of free agents, the appeal was obvious. Who wouldn't want to share the court with a transcendent talent who doesn't just score but also dishes out pinpoint passes and attracts nationwide attention? Playing alongside Clark could elevate a veteran's brand, boost a role player's stats, and generate a synergy that turns average teams into contenders. It was more than just being on a hot team. It was about stepping into the gravitational field of a young superstar who is reshaping the league's image. But Clark isn't simply a marketing machine. Teammates rave about her leadership qualities, her willingness to embrace intense practices, and her ability to make everyone around her better. She's the kind of player who holds herself accountable first, which fosters a locker room environment where veterans and rookies alike can coexist. For a league often overshadowed by other sports, Clark's presence is a beacon, and Indiana is basking in the glow. As the Fever stockpiled talent, the rest of the WNBA reeled in response. In Las Vegas, the reigning champs grappled with the loss of Sydney Colson, a vital piece of locker room chemistry who also happens to be Asia Wilson's best friend. Even though Colson's departure alone might not sink a franchise, it symbolized a broader issue. The once comfortable aces aren't automatically the top choice for every free agent. That cracks open the door for other teams to compete more aggressively. Meanwhile, Chicago has been dealing with its own turmoil, losing core players without a clear blueprint to replace their output. The Connecticut Sun, who flirted with championship contention for multiple seasons, now face the possibility of a full-scale rebuild after a series of underwhelming playoff performances and high-profile departures. Fans and analysts alike are asking the same question: has the balance of power shifted so decisively that Indiana might soon rule the league? This notion would have sounded absurd a year ago, but the WNBA has always been a place where momentum can flip quickly. The emergence of generational talents like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and others has sped up that process. Social media platforms are flooded with hot takes suggesting that while the Aces and Liberty once seemed destined for a finals clash, the Fever may crash that party sooner than expected. Overnight, Indiana went from a footnote to a force that other teams must plan around. For many, the biggest shock isn't just the star power the Fever acquired. It's that they managed to do so quietly, with none of the flashy preludes or drawn-out negotiations that typically mark a super team in the making. When the news dropped, fans had to scramble to keep track of each new arrival. One day it was Natasha Howard, the next day it was Dana Bonner, then Sophie Cunningham, followed by Sydney Colson. It's the kind of off-season blitz that dramatically resets expectations and might well reset the championship chase. Plenty of hype centers on the Fever's new signings, but it's crucial to remember they already had a budding core. Aya Boston brings a post presence rarely seen in a league full of undersized bigs. She's physically dominant, yet nimble on her feet, capable of defending some of the best scorers in the game while also putting up efficient numbers on offense. Her synergy with Caitlin Clark took shape in their rookie season, culminating in highlight-worthy plays that showcased a level of maturity uncommon in young duos. Then there's Kelsey Mitchell, a proven scorer who can torch defenses from anywhere. Some people forget that before Clark came along, Mitchell was often the only reason to watch Indiana. She carried the team through tough stretches and kept them remotely competitive. Now, with Clark as a facilitator and a lethal perimeter threat, Mitchell can step into more advantageous spots on the floor. Opponents no longer have the luxury of double-teaming her, which means she's poised to thrive even further. Lexi Hull adds a layer of hustle and unselfishness. She's the glue player who does the dirty work, diving for loose balls, setting hard screens, knocking down timely threes, and locking down opponents on defense. While she doesn't garner the same headlines as Clark, Boston, or Mitchell, her contributions form the backbone of a championship-level rotation. And let's not overlook the mosaic of skill sets that the new arrivals bring. Natasha Howard and Dana Bonner both hold championship experience, vital for a team with big postseason ambitions. Sophie Cunningham supplies that extra spark, the intangible feisty factor that can flip the momentum of a game. Sydney Colson may not stuff the stat sheet, but her effect on team chemistry can't be overstated. Together, these pieces form a roster that looks ready to lock horns with any squad in the league. Suddenly, what used to be a question, does Indiana even have a competitive starting five? turns into a statement. This might be the scariest starting five in the WNBA. Fans are indulging in fantasies of Clark dishing no-look passes to a cutting Natasha Howard, or Kelsey Mitchell running the wing on fast breaks while Aya Boston anchors the paint. It's an exciting time not just for Indiana but for the entire league, which seems to be on the cusp of a renaissance led by new faces. While the Fever celebrate one high-profile signing after another, one voice has grown noticeably quieter: Sheryl Swoopes. Earlier, she confidently declared that Indiana was an afterthought, somewhere players might go out of desperation, not choice. She painted a picture of a battered locker room, a star rookie who wouldn't live up to the hype, and a revolving door of disgruntled veterans. Fast forward to the present, and those ominous forecasts have fallen flat. Commentators who once took Swoopes' claims at face value are now questioning her sources. Did she rely on outdated intel, or was there a personal animus fueling her commentary? Swoopes has made only brief statements since, often framing them as misunderstood quotes or clarifications that she merely said the transition would take time. But transcripts and video clips reveal the original tone. She was certain that free agents would steer clear of Indiana. Now that the exact opposite has happened, her credibility has taken a noticeable hit. To some observers, this tension between Swoopes and the Fever hints at a larger generational clash in the WNBA. Legends from the league's earlier years carved out their legacies in a time when women's basketball fought an uphill battle for respect. Today's young stars, like Caitlin Clark, benefit from bigger social media platforms, more robust college hype, and faster ways to connect with fans globally. It's not that the old generation didn't want the league to grow. It's that seeing this level of stardom emerge overnight can be jarring. The new wave, led by Clark's almost effortless rise, represents a different kind of celebrity. Still, it's impossible to deny Clark's impact. Swoopes can discount certain narratives all she wants, but the bottom line is this: players are choosing to team up with Clark, not run away from her. The entire Fever organization has rallied around the phenomenon, leveraging it to build a top-tier roster in record time. If Swoopes finds this sudden paradigm shift unsettling, she's not alone. Yet the league itself is embracing it, as more fans watch, more sponsors invest, and more eyes turn to see what Caitlin Clark and the Fever will accomplish next. In the span of a single offseason, the Indiana Fever went from laughingstock to potential juggernaut. The critics who belittled them are either silent or frantically trying to reconcile reality with their earlier takes. The cynics who wrote off Caitlin Clark as a college wonder have been forced to face the undeniable truth. She's already one of the most impactful players in the league, maybe in the history of women's basketball. And as if that weren't enough, she's surrounded by an ever-growing cast of stars who all seem to genuinely want to be in Indiana. So, what happens now? Will the Fever immediately leapfrog the Aces and the Liberty, challenging for a title as early as next season? Or will they need a bit more time to gel, learning each other's tendencies and figuring out how to distribute touches among so many capable scorers? No matter the path, the future looks thrilling. The Fever aren't just here to play. They're here to win, and they've assembled a kind of depth and leadership that could spell trouble for anyone who underestimates them. For the broader WNBA, this shift is monumental. A franchise that once languished near the bottom of the standings is now reinvigorating the league with fresh storylines and heated rivalries. Fans are already marking their calendars for matchups against Las Vegas or Chicago or Connecticut, drooling at the prospect of seeing Clark, Boston, Howard, Bonner, and Mitchell share the court. Attendance is up, TV ratings are on the rise, and social media chatter is more vibrant than ever. In a sense, the Indiana Fever have become the story in a league that thrives on big narratives. They've given fans a reason to tune in, and they've proven that you can never count out a franchise just because it's been down in the past. As for Sheryl Swoopes, the invitation to admit she underestimated this team remains on the table. Whether she takes it is anyone's guess. But for the rest of us, the message is clear. The WNBA has a new powerhouse, and it's wearing red, gold, and navy. Keep watching because this journey is just beginning, and if the Fever keep building momentum, it might be downright unstoppable. Do you think the Fever will reign supreme in the near future? Drop your thoughts in the comments. make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell so you never miss another major development. One thing's for sure, the Caitlin Clark era is here, and the Indiana Fever are done waiting in the shadows. Stay tuned, because tomorrow's headlines might be even more jaw-dropping than today's.
This is the motion that the Indiana Fever / Caitlin Clark have.
Angel Reese is fuming again, and this time, it's about how her team, the Chicago Sky, threw her under the bus and utterly ignored her. "Why are only Caitlin Clark games moving to the United Center?" she asked reporters, clearly puzzled by why her own team doesn't get the same star treatment. But let's be real. Angel may not like the answer, but it's pretty simple. People are showing up in droves for Caitlin, not her. And that's the kind of truth that hits harder than a blocked layup.
My goodness. America's team versus a team who has the person who is the scourge of society. Oh, God. Oh, man. Quote, they watch for me, too. Barbie night? Which one is Barbie night? You got to think one of the two is going to be Barbie night, right? Look at this. Laughing my ass off. Caitlin is really giving every single team a fundraising game. I am weak. My GOAT is simply different. The CC hype is real. Is this the Caitlin or Angel effect? Stop it. Caitlin Clark effect. GOAT. Let's go see what the Fever fans got to say. I mean, seriously, the Angel Reese effect. Sarcasm. Every venue CC plays in, the Caitlin Clark effect.
Like, I'm surprised we're not playing at the United Center. I thought that would have been really good for the game and really good for all the women's basketball fans in Chicago. So maybe there's a conflict of some sort that I don't know about. Obviously, that's a little above my pay grade. But we're excited, you know. One game at a time.
Have you ever witnessed a moment in sports when everything changes overnight, when crowd sizes double, rivalries intensify, and entire franchises reevaluate their strategies? In the WNBA, something like this is happening right now, and it revolves around two rookies whose names have dominated headlines, fan forums, and social media feeds: Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. On the surface, these two athletes both entered the league with enormous hype, each boasting impressive college resumes, legions of loyal fans, and star-quality presence. Yet if you've followed recent announcements, you'll notice a trend that casts them in very different lights. Teams across the league are rushing to move games against Caitlin Clark's Indiana Fever to bigger, iconic venues. Meanwhile, Angel Reese, who also joined the Chicago Sky with high expectations, finds herself stuck in the smaller Wintrust Arena and wondering why she's not getting the same red carpet treatment. In other words, the WNBA is at a crossroads. On one side, you have a rookie who seems to ignite entire cities simply by stepping on the court. On the other, you have an outspoken, charismatic star who believes she's just as big a draw, yet, somehow, her games remain in mid-sized arenas. Tempers are flaring, fans are debating, and front offices are making big money moves. If you've been curious about why the Chicago Sky suddenly decided to host only 2 of their home games, both against the Fever, at the massive United Center, or why Angel Reese is calling out her own team for ignoring her, buckle up. This story goes beyond personal rivalries. It's about money, identity, and the shaping of women's basketball's future, maybe even its survival. Let's explore this saga piece by piece, starting with the surprising venue shifts that many believe reveal the WNBA's new direction. The first shockwave that rocked the league came when the Chicago Sky announced they were moving 2 upcoming home games from their usual Wintrust Arena to the iconic United Center. For context, Wintrust Arena, while modern and comfortable, tops out at around 10,000 seats on a good night. By contrast, the United Center can comfortably fit 21,000 screaming fans, potentially more if you factor in standing room-only sections. That's more than double the capacity, an enormous leap for any professional team, especially for just 2 regular season matchups. At first glance, people assumed these must be special games, maybe a playoff series or a major showcase event. But then the details emerged. Both games are against the Indiana Fever, a team that has historically struggled to contend in the upper echelons of the WNBA. It didn't take long for fans and analysts to realize what, or rather, who, was driving the sudden shift: Caitlin Clark, the Fever's electrifying rookie guard who has been drawing unprecedented crowds wherever she goes. The front office tried to frame it in various ways. Statements mentioned wanting to reward fan passion and bring the best basketball experience to the biggest stage. But it's hard to ignore the straightforward economic logic. The demand for Caitlin's games is off the charts. Ticket lines that might ordinarily snake around the block for a playoff game are showing up for a regular season match simply because Clark is on the roster. If you're the Sky's management, you can almost see the dollar signs floating above the seats. Every new seat filled is extra revenue, everything from ticket sales to concessions to merchandise. Still, not everyone was cheering. Fans loyal to Angel Reese, the Sky's own rookie star, openly questioned the decision. The subtext was clear. Is this a sign that the team values Clark more than their very own rookie? Why didn't they ever move venues for Angel's biggest games? The frustration only grew when Reese herself told reporters she was shocked and disappointed that her strong performances and media presence didn't trigger a similar move. She even suggested the organization ignored her potential to draw a huge audience. And while some of that frustration may sound like sour grapes, you can't entirely blame her for feeling slighted. She was supposed to be a massive draw in her own right, especially after her high-profile college career and her success on social media platforms. Yet not once did the Sky decide to relocate a game on her behalf. Then Caitlin Clark arrives with the Fever, and boom, the big switch happens for 2 games, no less. Before people jump to label Reese's reaction as petty, let's keep in mind the bigger backdrop. The WNBA has historically struggled with attendance and profitability. Sudden changes like these don't just happen on a whim. They are carefully calculated moves, typically backed by unambiguous data pointing to one simple conclusion. Caitlin Clark is the league's biggest ticket seller right now. But is that the whole story? Not exactly. Because when you dig deeper, you'll find that these venue changes aren't limited to Chicago. A wave of similar announcements has swept the WNBA, each one painting the same picture. Wherever Clark goes, arenas get bigger. And that brings us to the simmering rivalry. To understand how we ended up here, you have to rewind to the final year or 2 of each star's college career. Angel Reese captivated audiences with her commanding presence in the paint, her fierce rebounding skills, and her unapologetically flashy persona. She didn't just play basketball, she performed it. Social media ate it up. Videos of her post-game celebrations, highlight reel blocks, and off-court candor racked up millions of views. By the time she declared for the WNBA, many believed she was poised to become the face of women's basketball, a player who could draw fans into arenas by the thousands. Then there's Caitlin Clark, who carved out an entirely different reputation. Known for her seemingly endless shooting range, fearless drives to the basket, and knack for hitting buzzer beaters, she became a living highlight reel. In college, she routinely dropped 30-plus points, peppering in half-court shots like they were routine free throws. Online clips of her stepbacks and pinpoint dimes went viral for a different reason. They showcased raw skill that felt generational. The widespread sentiment was, you have to see her play in person. Even the ways they approached fame diverged. Angel embraced the spotlight on social media, launching collaborations, doing TikTok dances, and regularly engaging with fans. She projected a people's champion vibe, making it clear she enjoyed the attention and wanted more of it. Caitlin, on the other hand, stayed comparatively low-key in personal branding, letting her on-court exploits do most of the talking. Sure, she appeared in commercials and social media posts, but her central narrative was about competition, not celebrity. By the time both landed in the WNBA, it was inevitable they'd be compared, pitted against each other, and scrutinized for every move. Reporters framed them as the 2 rising superstars. Fans argued online about who was better. Entire podcasts popped up analyzing their potential impact on the league. Some folks saw it as a blessing, 2 young stars forging the next era of women's basketball. Yet the numbers ended up telling a more lopsided story. While Angel's brand is undeniably strong, Caitlin's brand is shaping up to be unstoppable. This is the core of Angel's frustration. If you believe you're equally valuable and you see another rookie commanding all the big stage events, you're bound to question whether you're being overlooked or whether the hype you built up might have been overstated. It doesn't help that the WNBA, starved for revenue for years, is now throwing the weight of their marketing behind Caitlyn's phenomenon at every turn. But that leads to an even bigger question. Is the hype around Caitlyn real, or is it a temporary wave fueled by social media chatter? The next section might clear that up because once you look at the attendance figures and revenue numbers, it becomes difficult to deny reality. In sports, debates about greatness can get subjective. Personal preferences, media narratives, and hype can muddy the waters. But attendance stats, ticket sales, and revenue projections rarely lie. And when it comes to Caitlyn Clark, the numbers are speaking loud and clear. Start with the Indiana Fever's home attendance last season. They didn't just set a franchise record. They demolished the previous league-wide record by 36%, bringing in crowds that hadn't been seen since the early 2000s. They had multiple nights where they hit over 20,000 fans, a benchmark that used to be rare even for top-tier NBA events. Some described it as a mini-cultural phenomenon, with families, college students, and even casual sports fans flocking to see Clark launch her gravity-defying shots. But the Fever's home attendance wasn't the only story. On the road, Caitlyn continued to drive sellouts and standing room-only scenarios. Opposing teams realized that whenever Indiana rolled into town, they could count on a significant bump in sales. Lines snaked around the block. Merchandise with Clark's name on it sold out before tip-off. Concession stands reported record-breaking earnings. For franchises struggling to stay in the black, it was like discovering a gold mine in their backyard. How does Angel Reese's impact stack up? By most accounts, it's respectable, but not revolutionary. Chicago's usual attendance hovered around 8,000 to 9,000 fans for regular season games where Angel suited up. Wintrust Arena, which holds about 10,000, still had empty seats on some nights. Even if Reese's presence led to a minor uptick in ticket sales, it never reached the point where Chicago had to panic and say, "We don't have enough room." Now, consider the estimated windfall of moving even 2 games to the United Center. Analysts suggest that the Sky will rake in an extra $4 million from those matchups alone. That sum includes ticket revenue, parking fees, food and beverage, and the all-important merchandise sales that skyrocket when a star like Caitlyn is in the building. When you've got an opportunity to make that kind of money in just a couple of games, it's nearly impossible for executives to ignore. Angel might argue that this is favoritism, but the counterargument is simple: it's supply and demand. If the demand for your presence isn't high enough to justify doubling the arena size, it's a tough sell for any organization to take on the extra logistical costs and risks. The WNBA is still a business, and businesses follow the money. And here's the kicker: these attendance gains haven't slowed. Season ticket packages for the Fever are reportedly selling out at record rates, and many of Clark's away games are expected to reach near-capacity crowds. Teams like the Washington Mystics and Connecticut Sun followed Chicago's lead, relocating their Fever home matchups to larger arenas, including Boston's TD Garden for the Sun and Baltimore's CFG Bank Arena for the Mystics. Each instance underscores the same phenomenon. Clark is the golden ticket. But how does this tidal wave of attention affect the fans themselves? Are they relishing the show, or resenting what they see as undue hype for one rookie? Let's dive into the online discourse and public sentiment swirling around these monumental changes. Log onto Twitter, Instagram, or Reddit, and you'll see a kaleidoscope of opinions that range from reverential admiration to biting sarcasm. On the one hand, Caitlyn Clark loyalists are doubling down on the notion that she's single-handedly lifting women's basketball to new heights. They post endless clips of her signature step-back jumper, accompanied by captions like, "Queen of the Court," or "Can't wait to see her break more records." They see these massive venue changes as proof that the WNBA finally has its generational superstar. On the flip side, Angel Reese's supporters aren't staying silent. They question why the league never offered similar opportunities to their favorite star, especially when she was lauded as a top prospect during her college career. They ask whether there might be biases at play, be they cultural, regional, or even deeper subjects like race or style of play. While these topics can get heated and complicated, many fans feel there's an undercurrent that the league and sponsors prefer Clark's approach, both on and off the court. Then there are the more nuanced takes. Some fans acknowledge that Caitlin Clark is undeniably a draw, but argue that other players, including Angel, deserve more credit for the league's recent surge in popularity. They point out that Angel's presence, her flair, and her active social media following also introduced many new viewers to women's basketball. One viral comment summed it up: "Caitlin is filling arenas, but let's not pretend Angel isn't pulling in her own crowd." The gap isn't as gigantic as the media wants you to believe. But every time critics try to push back, the raw data, like attendance figures, viewership stats, and skyrocketing merchandise sales, hits them right between the eyes. It's difficult to claim a pure media narrative when you've got entire front offices deciding to book bigger venues just for one player's arrival. The tension is also compounded by the personalities of Angel and Caitlin themselves. Angel is outspoken, unafraid to call out perceived slights, and direct about wanting to be recognized for her impact. Caitlin is comparatively reserved and rarely addresses the controversies head-on, often deflecting praise by talking about her team's performance rather than her own. This difference in communication styles fuels fans' online arguments, with each side accusing the other of having an inferiority complex or too much arrogance. In the end, it's not just about which player is better, it's also about how fan cultures and brand building are evolving in women's basketball. Some fans love the drama. It energizes the league, sparks debates, and keeps the WNBA trending on social media in a way it never has before. Others worry it might overshadow the actual game and create resentment among players who feel overshadowed by the Caitlin Clark show. So, what does the league itself think of all this chatter? From a business standpoint, they likely see an enormous opportunity to finally break into mainstream profitability, driven by an unmistakable wave of public interest. And that brings us to the cold, calculating side of professional sports. Professional sports leagues walk a tightrope between sporting integrity and business profitability. On paper, everything is supposed to be about fair competition, athletic excellence, and fans' love for the game. Behind the scenes, though, it boils down to revenue streams, sponsorship deals, and TV contracts. If a particular player or matchup can generate a spike in all three, you'd better believe league executives will capitalize on it fast. For years, the WNBA has existed under the shadow of financial constraints, lesser-known marketing campaigns, and tepid mainstream coverage. Teams often operate with smaller budgets, occasionally leading to limited flights, subpar facilities, or compromised practice conditions. Recently, we've seen incremental improvements and expansions, but the league has struggled to match the explosive growth seen in other women's sports segments, such as women's soccer. Then, along comes Caitlin Clark, who seems to be a one-woman solution to a multitude of these financial challenges. Ticket revenues are surging, new sponsors are inking deals, and local businesses near the arenas are enjoying an influx of customers on game nights. The league's front office can pitch new TV deals using metrics that show exponential growth in live attendance, streaming numbers, and social media engagement, all driven by Clark's name recognition. So, from a purely business standpoint, focusing on Clark is the logical move. That might seem harsh or unfair if you're in Angel Reese's camp or a fan of another emerging star. But sports history is littered with examples of leagues hitching their wagon to a transcendent talent. Think Michael Jordan for the NBA in the late 1980s and 1990s, or Tiger Woods for the PGA Tour. When you've got a potential generational phenom on your hands, you push that storyline because it draws in viewers, sponsors, and brand deals that can uplift everyone's paycheck. However, there's a flip side to be wary of. Over-reliance on a single star can be risky. What happens if Clark gets injured, or her performance dips significantly? Does the WNBA have enough momentum to sustain its newly discovered audience? Are other players like Angel Reese, Aaliyah Boston, and Aya Wilson being developed and marketed in a way that ensures the league can survive any dips in Clark's trajectory? The WNBA's leadership likely understands these risks. Still, the current moment is golden. Viewership is climbing, social media impressions are off the charts, and sponsors are paying attention like never before. The front offices of individual teams, therefore, act in their best interests. If moving 2 games to a bigger arena can produce millions in additional revenue, expecting them not to do it would be like telling a restaurant owner to refuse a dinner rush. Meanwhile, Angel Reese's frustration grows. She's openly voiced her displeasure, claiming her own team should see her as a similar draw, or at least support her in marketing endeavors that could boost attendance. But the question remains, is Angel's claim backed by tangible numbers, or is it more about perceived stature? Which leads us to her personal response and what she can do to turn the narrative around. When news broke that the Chicago Sky would only move games against the Indiana Fever to the United Center, Angel Reese didn't hide her emotions. She used words like ignored, disrespected, and undervalued in brief media scrums, making it clear she believed the organization was selling her short. Her argument? She's not just a sidekick or a second-tier star. She's an integral part of the league's growth, too. Fans of Reese point to her dynamic presence on social media. Her TikTok videos alone garner millions of views, and her previous high-profile college stints. They argue that if given the right platform and marketing push, Angel could bring just as many fans through the turnstiles. Their stance is that the franchise isn't investing enough resources in showcasing her personality and skill set, thereby creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where she remains overshadowed. What can Angel do to tip the scales in her favor? Sports analysts suggest a few avenues. Elevate her on-court performance. While Angel is unquestionably talented, if she starts posting consistently dominant numbers, like racking up 25 points and 15 rebounds per game, or developing a reliable jump shot that forces defenders to play her differently, she might become an undeniable headline. Performance always talks the loudest. Embrace rivalries on the court. Instead of shying away from comparisons to Caitlin, Angel could lean into them during games. If they end up facing each other more frequently, with high-stakes matchups that highlight their contrasting styles, she can drive storylines that make fans excited to witness Reese versus Clark, not just Clark alone. Strategic marketing collaborations. Ree might partner with major brands, philanthropic initiatives, or local businesses that amplify her name in Chicago and beyond. If every sports bar, billboard, or local radio station is talking about her, the fan engagement might start approaching Clark levels. Shift the narrative. There's a difference between complaining about not getting the spotlight and actively creating one's own. If Angel channels her frustration into a positive storyline, like working extra hours in the gym or mentoring younger players, fans could rally behind her underdog narrative, boosting her popularity organically. Of course, none of these steps guarantee an immediate leap to 21,000-seat arenas, but they might lay the groundwork for future seasons. Sometimes star power needs time to mature. Not every legendary player starts by selling out arenas in their rookie season. Critically, Angel must also be wary of alienating potential fans. When you publicly criticize your own team's decisions, you run the risk of appearing entitled or lacking team spirit. Some fans might interpret her words as whining rather than constructive self-advocacy. Striking the right balance between confidence and collaboration is crucial. It remains to be seen if the Sky will reconsider and move one of Angel's marquee matchups, perhaps against a well-known rival, to the United Center next season. That decision would likely hinge on tangible evidence that a Reese-led event could fill the seats. Until then, she finds herself in a tough spot, seemingly overshadowed by the unstoppable wave known as the Caitlin Clark effect. The immediate drama might center on Reese and Clark, but the implications stretch far beyond 2 rookies. The entire WNBA stands on the cusp of a potential renaissance, one fueled by social media virality, generational talents, and a fan base that